of the Budget Control Act, and it capped discretionary spending levels at current, basically they set numbers, right? So what happened is we continually fund the government through these what's called continuing resolutions because we don't have a budget. And so we got word that the Ryan Murray budget last week was going to come in above that discretionary spending cap level, which we think is unacceptable. And I think most people think it's unacceptable because it wasn't like it was this crazy right-winged idea. This was actually a bipartisan agreement. Mark Pryor voted for it. Everybody voted for it. President Obama signed it. And so our simple promise, our simple ask was just keep your promise. Congressional delegation, you signed and agreed to spending caps that were going to actually reduce the deficit. Let's just keep to that. And it's not even like we're asking for something outside of the mainstream. And the big problem we tried to avoid was, if we remember in October, we used the opportunity for the continuing resolution fight in order to try and defund Obamacare. And what happened was we walked away with Obamacare still law. We got no cuts. We shut down the government for 2 weeks. And at the end of the day, Obamacare, instead of talking about the failures of a website for 2 weeks, we talked about a shutdown. And I'll tell you that Melissa was with me. We were in Virginia for the final week of the election time. And I know for a fact that had we not shut the government down, Ken Cuccinelli would be governor of Virginia right now. Because for that 2 weeks of shutdown in October, which was 3 weeks before his election, you had between 900,000 and 1.2 million federal workers sitting at home watching ads all day, hearing that Cuccinelli and his buddies are shutting down the federal government. There's no question in my mind that that dynamic took away from his ability to talk about Obamacare for a month. So what we said was, let's try and get everybody on the same page and push Congress to just keep the promise. Literally, you don't have to do anything new. You just agree to the spending caps that you've already agreed to. What happened? They broke that deal. It was passed by the House not 2 hours ago. And I'll give you guys the details of that deal and I'll tell you the story. But I think it's a good opportunity for us to meet and chat anyway, because what we were able to accomplish in a day and a half as far as firing up people in activity-based to try and make a difference was nothing short of amazing. I know that Arkansas, for sure, alone, made nearly 1,000 contacts into their congressional delegation over the last day and a half. It's huge. And every one of you guys was a part of it. I know Bill Smith was making phone calls with us. Melissa probably called most of you and asked you to take an action. And so how do we do that? I mean, we just made this simple one-pager. How many people have gotten this in an email before? Did anybody get this in their email? A lot of people might have. And so this is a good opportunity for me to tell you guys about this stuff anyway. So this was the simplest way we could make anybody take an action. We provided you with talking points, the facts behind what's happening. We pre-wrote tweets in case that's how you want to get in touch with your congressman. And then we even put their contact information right on the back of this paper. And we emailed this out and we made sure everybody had this and had everybody in this room, and we've had multiple town halls across the state, had everybody just taken that one action, we probably could have pushed more people in our delegation to vote the right way. I'll tell you, it's been a while since it's happened, but how many people have been to a social media training that we've done? Has anybody been to one of those? Right, a couple of you guys have. And again, we'll talk about the spending stuff, but I want to talk about the result of what happened and how we can learn from that lesson. I always talk about in these social media trainings the purpose of social media, right? And what is the purpose of social media? We don't need the mainstream media anymore to get our message out. Today, I got a call from 3 completely different newspaper sites saying, I've been watching a ton of activity on Twitter circled around your guys' organization on this budget deal. What's your message and what are you doing? So what did we do? We reached out to membership completely for free and had activists tweeting with our messages, and we're getting basically free press on these deals. That's what Twitter's for, right? That's what social media is for. We're using free social media to drive earned media conversations. And now when people pick up the paper tomorrow and read the DemGaz, and they read the AP, and they read about this Budget Control Act deal, they're going to read about what AFP said about it. And so it's a fantastic way because we're now helping combat what the mainstream media is going to probably say about us. And now we have an opportunity to speak for ourselves. How many times have we read a paper, watched MSNBC, picked up Politico, and we're like, this is trash. This is not what we believe, but they're caricaturing our arguments. We don't have to do that anymore. And so all of this was accomplished, and I'll tell you, every one of the congressmen, Womack, Griffin, Crawford, Cotton, every one of them called my cell phone this morning and told me how they were going to vote. And they said, we've had a lot of activity, a lot of phone calls, and we appreciate what you guys are doing. We did not count on people calling us this week. And so I hope that if any of you weren't able to take an action yesterday or today, that you signed up with us. We don't spam your email. I think we send maybe one every 2 weeks or something, but we really do. We keep it to very important issues that we think you should keep up on. And had you just sent one tweet, made one quick phone call, and Bill and Reggie and Diana, they'll all tell you, these things matter. They really do. And if you don't think that your congressmen are listening, and especially your state legislators, if you don't think they're listening, this is a perfect example. And things like this paper right here that Melissa handed out to all of you, we do this for just about every key vote that needs to be done. And the cool thing is that you can pick up your cell phone and call me. You'll call my cell phone. Most people in this room probably have at some point gotten my business card. You can go to the website. Maybe you think that there's an issue that's pressing that you'd like us to look into. We can reach out to our policy team and create a one-pager for you too. We can help use our resources. We've teamed up and fought local millage tax increases in Hot Springs right here. And so we were supposed to be here tonight to talk about what's going on with the Budget Control Act, but that story's been written. So what I want to do is just tell you guys that we have resources and we have tools, and all of us care about the future of our country. And I know sometimes it feels like some of us care a little more, but the fact remains is that partnering with us and helping us do what we do is mutually beneficial for all of us. I can tell you that we haven't even started certain pressure on the state legislature for the fiscal session upcoming, but I'm already getting multiple calls from legislators saying, what is it that we can do that will make your membership happy? Because they know that if they do something wrong, they're going to encounter the same thing that happened last time, and they did not like coming home after the last legislative session, I promise you that. Mm-hmm. So we've already got people calling us, and I'll tell you, we have got some fantastic things coming that even now, I think in the next week, we're going to get significant changes to the private option that are already going to start saving money. Fantastic stuff that we could have not gotten 3, 4, 6 months ago, because I don't think they understood what they did when they passed that. Mm-hmm. So the end of the day, though, is that they aren't calling me because they're scared of me. They call me because they're scared of me calling you guys and you calling them. My position, and I'll tell you guys, I use the L word. I'm a lobbyist. I'm registered. I have to be just because I do that stuff. But when I walk into a committee hearing, it means nothing, except for the fact that we have 70,000 members statewide who are willing to take action on issues. The problem is that our power diminishes if people aren't willing to take action. And maybe it's not us. Maybe you guys want to call them. We actually encourage you guys to use your own. Pick them up, call them yourselves, use your own talking points. All we're trying to do is provide basic information and easiest way to take action possible. And so instead of me standing up here and telling you guys more about this, I'd rather ask you guys, what would it take? What do you think it would take? Or what is it that would get you to take action in the next year? Because I'll tell you that I have, on any given day, 3 to 5 phone calls that come to my phone from nationwide talking about Arkansas being ground zero in 2014. Everybody knows it. You know, I can't remember who posted it. You know, is Tom Cotton the future of the Republican Party? That race alone is probably tier 1 between us, Alaska, Louisiana, North Carolina. Those are all top tier races. We've got a governor's race next year where we may have an opportunity for, Democrats may have the last opportunity to have a Democrat governor in the South. There's a slim majority for Republicans in the House of Representatives. All of these things make Arkansas a focus of next year. And if we don't get out there and educate people on the issues that matter, we don't get the people who are going to do the right thing when it comes down to it. And so I'm going to let it happen to questions. We do have t-shirts and some hand signs and stuff that we want to hand out and make sure you guys get for coming out tonight. We didn't make the t-shirts with the No Empty Promises logo. We actually made them just generic AFP t-shirts. They're pretty fun. One of my favorite Reagan quotes, it's not that we're taxed too little, it's that we spend too much. So we've got those t-shirts, so make sure you get with Melissa in the Stars and Stripes there before you leave. We got plenty of sizes, but really I wanted to make this quick. We hadn't planned on this budget deal being closed by tonight, and so there's very little we can do at this point. But what I do want to do is have a conversation about what we can do going forward to make sure that we're all taking action and saving our country. And as my last caveat before I open the floor up here to conversations, there is an exciting opportunity right next week. How many people are aware of the special election in Senate District 21 going on? Jonesboro, yeah, which is John Cooper's race up there with Rockwell. We are going to be doing get out the vote phone calls. And I'll tell you, this is the stuff that I'll tell you guys, nobody probably dislikes phone banking and door knocking more than me, because I promise you, there are a few people in this world who have done more of it. I started volunteering when I was I'll backtrack. There's Wesley Vanderhoff, who works for us, has probably done more phone banking and door knocking than me. But I'll tell you, ever since I was 18 and I was volunteering on campaigns, I have been the kid who's out there door knocking for 8 hours a day on Saturdays, phone banking all day. It's not the most fun work, but I'll tell you, the impact that it has when you're going to see 2,000 to 3,000 people turn out in that special election in January is profound. And so what we've got is a system in place. It'll be on a tablet. You'll pick up your iPad, you'll push a button, and you're literally just calling people and saying, hey, I'm hoping that you can get out there and vote. That's all there is to it. And say, are you willing to vote? And if they say yes or no, and then can I verify your voting location with you? That's literally all we're going to be doing. It's a very simple message. There's no surveys. There's no, would you like to hear more about Americans for Prosperity? All the frustrating things, we've worked the kinks out of that. But we need people, because Melissa can't do is sit there and make those phone calls all day by herself. We've all remembered the old math problems when we were a kid. If John can paint a house in 8 hours and Austin can do it in 6, what happens? How fast can they do it together? Think about the math if everybody in here was to make 5 phone calls, right? That's simple, 5 phone calls. So again, the conversation is, how is it that we can facilitate your opportunity to take action? And maybe it's not phone banking. Maybe your thing is handwriting letters. Maybe it's data entry. There is a way that you can take action. The Catholic Church always says people have one of 3 things, right? Time, talent, or treasure. And we can all give one of those 3 things, at least a little bit. And so, my plea to everyone really is based around that concept, is that I promise you have something to give. If it's a $5 donation or 10 minutes on the phone, all of that stuff matters. And Melissa's here in Hot Springs full time. Her job is to make sure that people who are willing to take action can. And I'll tell you, for the people who have been willing to take action already, they probably got plenty of phone calls from her. And to alleviate that, I'm sure they're going to make phone calls and find people to help out. But again, if we're not outreaching to our community and talking to our community about the issues that matter, and we're just sitting in an echo chamber, we lose that war big time. So I'm going to let this go. I'm just going to let you guys ask me questions. I'll answer questions. If we don't have questions, that's okay, but you should have a question.
Jason, how are we we're getting ready to go into session here in about a month and a half, a couple of months. How are we doing with the legislator? Have we got a particular legislator that's going to present the bill to separate Obamacare from DHS?
Yeah, so that's a great question, so I'll recap that question for her. Who's going to submit the bill that's going to separate Obamacare, the private option, from the DHS bill?
Explain that, please.
Sure. That's a fair point. As of right now, in order to defund Obamacare in Arkansas, Medicaid expansion, private option, you would need to, the first process is either getting the committee chairman, Joint Budget Committee chairman, be willing to separate those bills and submit them on their own, because as of right now, that expansion population, the money sits within the budget for DHS, which pays for current Medicaid, the expansion, it pays for all of the bureaucratic functions that the Department of DHS handles right now. So either we can separate that in committee, or you vote down the entire state budget when it comes to the floor, and the Senate President, Jonathan Dismay, who has already agreed that he's willing to do so, will separate that and they go forward on their own. As of right now, I promise you there are 20 at least who would do so. And we are in the midst of strategy sessions right now talking about what that looks like. One of the biggest fights that I'm involved in right now, I will tell you, is working to reverse what is known as auto assignment. It is the most disgusting form of Medicaid outreach I've ever seen, and I wish I would have printed out the forms for y'all today. here's what we run into. There are about 70,000 new Medicaid recipients already signed up in Arkansas, which is huge. 70,000 people already. Do you know how many people have signed up for private insurance coverage in this state? Like people who actually went to the exchange and said, I would like to buy insurance?
About 1,000.
About 400.
400.
About 400. So that means for every one person willing to buy insurance, you probably have, I don't know, 70 new Medicaid recipients. And here's the frustrating thing. We all remember, many of us were in the legislature, in the Capitol, when they passed this bill, and we were all promised and we were all told that the way that we're going to create savings and the way that this thing is better than traditional Medicaid is that it institutes personal responsibility. People are going to have to actually take control of their medical care instead of just walking into a hospital, right? That was the concept there. So here's how they got their 70,000 signups. 48,000 already have been through an auto assignment process. How does that work? So DHS goes over and they talk to other bureaucrats and they say, hey, do you have the list of everybody on food stamps in Arkansas? It's about 132,000 people. So they mail a letter saying, good news, because you already are on food stamps, you're pre-qualified for free health insurance too. If you sign this piece of paper and put it back in this envelope, which we've already prepaid the postage, filled out and done for you, you get free insurance. That's it. That's all. They didn't have to put their name down. They didn't have to put their address down. They didn't have to go through the TSA double pat that healthcare.gov makes you go through. Nothing. They literally signed their name and they date it.
And that's legal?
Completely legal. It was put into the Section 1115 waiver, which is the demonstration waiver. We think that should have cleared through Rules and Regs Committee. We think that if we're talking personal responsibility, they should be forced to actually sign up for the health care. Because the way it works is it was supposed to be a notification letter. Hey, you should know that you qualify for Medicaid under the new bill. And that should have been it, but in the fine print it says if you sign this letter and turn it back, you're telling us you want free stuff, and if you don't go online and apply for coverage in 30 days, we'll just auto-assign you a plan. So 50,000 people now have not even started to take responsibility even for the sign-up process, and we're supposed to think that we're going to lower costs through personal responsibility. Yes?
Another thing about that, Jason, that it would be a good point of separating them. We have a real problem with DHS. When they get money, it just gets lost in there. And if you have it separated, you can audit it and keep up better, like separating food stamps from the
Right.
agricultural bill.
Right.
And
Yeah, so to her point, you get a more transparent process by
Right.
separating these things. We agree. And I'll tell you that there has been no more scrutinized bill out of the legislature than private option so far. I promise you that. And every single committee, I promise you, I spend more time than I should over at those committee hearings at the Capitol. I'm there 3 days a week. I'm at every single committee hearing. And every time something happens, every change, every thought, they hear about it. And we are forcing every step of the way to try and get this thing ratcheted down, at least transparent, right? That's what we need. Most people don't even know. Did anybody ever remember, I think it was in July, maybe August, there was a grant available from the federal government to pay. They had already burned through $4.5 million worth of advertising, and they wanted another 4.3. So we issued an action alert, and we stopped that, which is fantastic. That was a $4.3 million savings. But in addition to that, when we were arguing over the rules and regs that were coming out of the private option, we saved the state of Arkansas an estimated like $10 to $20 million a year for the next 3 years. And how did we do that? Through bureaucrats trying to run roughshod over legislators who might not have noticed what they'd done. Within the private option, in the waiver process, they asked for, once a person qualifies for Medicaid, we want to give them 12 months of continuous eligibility. So what does that mean? That means that Reggie goes online, he's qualified for Medicaid, he's granted 365 days of uninterrupted coverage. So the next day, Reggie wins the Powerball. He's got $300 million. He still gets free health insurance for another year. We argued, one, it's a disingenuous process, and two, I thought the federal government would force the state to pay the money back past the person's eligibility period. And we looked at a study, and DHS agreed with us that 35% of Medicaid patients moving in and out of eligibility within 6 months, which means that you're looking at over 1/3 of patients being ineligible within 6 months, and we're going to give free healthcare for a year. So if the average healthcare recipient is $500 a month, so $6,000 a year, times 1/3 of the 250,000 eligibility population, which is what, 80,000. So 80,000 times 6,000 a year. Running the quick numbers, I mean, you're talking tons of stuff that the state was liable to pay that money back to the feds just because we didn't want to check their income. And so we doubled down on that. We said not only do we want to verify income on a continuous basis, we're actually going to means test, which means that they have to prove not just their income but their assets too. And that's happening now, because I want to make sure that we are actually helping those who need the help, who qualify for the help, and we're not going to just give stuff to people who are cheating the system. So these are savings and changes and things we're pushing for on an everyday basis, every single day. And it helps because we've got people who are willing to call their legislators.
All right. Clarify for me. I go online, I'm at that 138% federal poverty level. I apply. But I've got a boat and 2 cars parked in my backyard. So they're not just going to look at my income, they're going to ask about my assets, because I know people that have been online and have applied and they have not been asked about assets.
Sure.
It's just
This is new. This is brand new, right? So this is an Arkansas only deal too, because since we did through an alternative model, we get certain things that other states might not. And so means testing is something. I was literally on the phone with legislators today on the way here, getting this instituted. So it'll be January 1 is when we're hoping to do it. The problem is, as of right now, the only means testing software that we have available in the state is what DHS uses for nursing homes, and it's not a perfect system. We're trying to work, but that's, again, one of these things we're continually asking for, we're continually pushing for. So that's the plan, is to root out those problems of people who probably, maybe they have, like you said, a boat, a sports car there, but their income's low, so they qualify, and they really shouldn't. And that's coming, and it's not there yet, but it's coming.
okay, so it's not.
It's not there yet. So if you went there today, you wouldn't see a means test. It's something that we're adding to the online exchange. I want that there. I think for the taxpayer, I think it's unfair, especially when you consider we've got a website, calculatemycare.com. You can go online and figure out what your health insurance rates are. And Arkansan, take a 27-year-old like myself living in Pulaski County, the cheap plan available to me if I was to buy private insurance today is $54. The cheapest plan available on Obamacare, $184. The very bare bones cheapest plan available, right?
And you get a maternity policy.
Right, and I get all kinds of good stuff. But anyway, so what they're doing is, and I make above the 138, I make above the 400. I make above the 400. So I get no subsidy, I get nothing, but what I do get is a 273% increase in my healthcare costs, and that's it. I just basically, not only that, but in addition to higher healthcare costs, now we get hit with the 21 new taxes in Obamacare. And that's really what hurts the most, is the middle class who's ineligible for subsidies, who's now going to be forced to pay higher taxes and higher premiums with no help. And I'm telling you, that's a lot of people. And it's really unfortunate that there are people that cheat the system.
So, through these rules and regs, is it going to be going through the insurance committee, or?
We're kind of working that out. So this is, there's good and there's bad with term limits. I like being able to kick bums out after a couple of years, The problem is that a lot of bureaucratic procedures, legislators don't know, so you have to ask bureaucrats, lobbyists who honestly know the system better. So we're in the midst of getting an opinion on which way it's going to go through. We're not sure if we have to wait until fiscal session to make a substantive change. We think we can get it in ALC review, which means next week. These are all things we're having conversations about today. Ideally, we have that ready for January 1, though. Yes.
Talking about going to the legislative session in Little Rock, I know Nancy and John go almost every day. Well, I could go sometimes. Is there certain ways that you can alert us that when we need to go, is our presence felt, or is it better just to call the legislature?
No, okay, so yeah, that's a perfect question, and it's a great question. We're trying to be more strategic this year, and what we're trying to do is organize certain days that we get as many people as we can there. And the problem is that with the legislative calendar, it changes a lot. But to your point, the most impactful thing that ever happens in the legislature is when their constituents show up and knock on their door. Nothing beats coming to the Capitol. Phone calls are good, texts are good, emails are good, but nothing beats. And Senator Hendren, who's probably one of my favorite legislators, who's consistently conservative, says nothing freaks those guys out more than when they got 100 of their constituents knocking on their door. So we're creating the alert system. This is the point of having Melissa here in the area, because she can be able to call who I think are some of the organizers who can then call everybody else and say, hey, we've got a van or a bus or something, right? Let's load everybody up. We'll take you to the Capitol, and then you can come back. We're organizing those things. Virginia, for example, fought Medicaid expansion, and this was a successful thing that they used, was putting people on buses and getting them to the Capitol. And I'll tell you that there's I've been in fundraising is the least favorite part of my job, because I actually like getting out and doing things. But the cool thing is we've got donor buy-in now to have field coordinators like Melissa. We've got people in Northwest Arkansas. We're going to have people in Northeast Arkansas full-time. And it's not like campaigns where you hire them and then they get fired in November. We've got donor buy-in to keep them on a continuous basis, so that it's people in your community working with you on a day-to-day basis, making sure that when issues come up, it's not just, me calling people saying, hey, can you get here? It's Melissa's probably seen you 3 times this week already. She can tell you, hey, we're heading to the Capitol this week, but can you make it? If not, can you at least sign this letter that has constituents of people saying, I couldn't make it today, but I'm very interested in this piece of legislation. So to your point, yes and yes on, is it impacted? Yes. And is it worth it? Yes. Yes.
Number one, do we know how our representatives in the House voted on this budget?
Yes, we do, and I can tell you right now if you're interested. Your Congressman Tom Cotton today voted no on the Ryan Murray budget, as did Congressman Crawford up in the 1st District. 2nd and 3rd District both voted yes.
Can you give us any kind of idea what's going to happen in the Senate?
It's going to pass.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's a done deal. You can still call Senator Pryor. I think it's worth it. I think you're going to hear a lot probably in the next week that, reckless Congressman Cotton wants to shut down the government again, whatever it is. Putting pressure on Senator Pryor and letting him know that this is something Arkansans want, is more reasonable spending levels, is still very helpful. And I can tell you, like I said, Tim Griffin called me today, Congressman Griffin in the 2nd District. He's my congressman. We talked for a half hour. He was not put in a good place. He got all the phone calls. He appreciated that. He wanted me to come here and tell you guys, hey, look, he sat down, took time out of his very busy day. We talked for a half hour. He voted for the deal. He said, look, I don't want to vote for this thing. I would love to spend $967 billion. He said, you can tell them, because I would agree to it, to get it at $900 billion. He's like, I'm crazy enough, I'd probably go to $800 billion. He said, and I'm in the military and I'm okay with the defense cuts. I would have left the sequester cuts if I needed to, because I want to cut the government. But the unfortunate thing is that we couldn't get enough votes to hit that $967 billion mark, which is what we asked for. And so, from Congressman Griffin's standpoint, he had the gumption to pick up the phone and call me and tell me I'm voting yes. I want to vote no, but to tell you the truth, this is the best thing we can get. And he's like, and I don't want to do it, but I'm going to do it. Other congressmen, very conservative guys, are voting the same way on this thing. And the biggest thing we've got to avoid is a shutdown. And I agree, the shutdown, we lost that fight big time in the PR realm, and it's unfortunate. But he picked up the phone, he called me, and he said, and look, I'm going to vote just about every other time. He's still got a 90% score. His score is going to go down with us, but to your point, Congressman Cotton, your congressman deserves a phone call and a thank you. So if you guys go home today or maybe tomorrow, shoot him an email, tweet with him like, thank you for standing up for fiscal responsibility, because a lot of times they hear all the worst of it, that we're going to light them on fire, and we forget to thank them sometimes. And so if you do get an opportunity to go home, send a tweet, post to Facebook, and tell him thank you, I think he'd appreciate it. And Congressman Crawford up in the 1st District would too.
Yeah, that is very important. We thank them.
Yeah.
They very seldom ever get thanked. We always hear the gripes and complaints generally afterwards, so we do need to talk about them.
And we will be, and we'll be in. If everybody's signed in, I think there's a sign-in sheet out there, and when we hand out T-shirts, we'll make sure that you get signed in. We'll send an email with all of Congressman Cotton's contact information, everybody here should say, hey, we really appreciate you. Keep up the good work in Washington because he did vote the right way for us. Manny.
Yes, I like the second thing here about having people go to the Capitol. We have our meeting middle of January, and if I can't make it, we can have a list of people that Melissa can call and say, this we need. I can't go, but there's 5 other people who said, call us. It's got to be targeted,
Yep.
and it's got to be important.
Yep.
It can't be fire drill after fire drill, or it loses its impact.
Yeah.
So when we make a call, it's important, and maybe all 6 of us will go, or 12.
Yeah, so Manny said basically, let's be organized, and I agree, and that's the point of having Melissa here. I've got this, her counterpart up in Northwest, we're gonna have somebody in Northeast, and I'll tell you, I was just talking with Bill before we started, we've got a brand new database, very similar to what the Obama campaign used in 2012, and it's all focused on managing this information. And the idea is that it's an online portal that Melissa can sign into, and she's been putting this information. So maybe Manny's able to go to the Capitol. He's willing to go to the Capitol. That's the action he's willing to take. He likes to go to the Capitol. Maybe Reggie doesn't like going to the Capitol, but he's willing to pick up the phone call. So she can go in once she's been loading this information about her volunteers and say, okay, Garland County, people who can go to the Capitol, and your name is tagged with the action that you like to take, and it blasts me a full list and all the contact information. And so the biggest thing is, A, we've got to be strategic in terms of organizing that data, which we're getting very good at, I promise you. 2012 was a huge learning experience. We've spent 2013 taking that knowledge and building on that. In 2014, the wheels will be greased and we're going to be heading at full speed. And the point is not only do we need to be strategic in the organizing of the data, but the organizing of the people. And the idea is it's not fire drill after fire drill, hey, tomorrow's a vote, can you be here? And unfortunately, the way the process works, there are going to be those. We'll never be able to get out of those completely. But we still think, and this was, I guess I'll tell a quick story and it'll come back to the point that I'm trying to make. And this is what grassroots pressure can do. I just got finished writing a 1-2-5-6 plan, which is a 1-2-5-6 year strategic plan. And I was working it out and I called my counterpart in Indiana, his name's Chase, he's the state director there, and I said, hey, I was working through my strategic planning documents and stuff, and in these 6-year windows, I'm looking, and the tough thing about writing a plan that talks about issues 6 years out is like in politics, things change day to day. What's the issue of the day? Common Core was a hot issue this summer. How could I have predicted 3 years ago Common Core be a hot issue this summer? How are you kind of fitting that into your budget? And he said, I thought long and hard about that until it came to me in one moment. He said, if we're doing the right work, if we're organizing correctly and we're strong enough, we don't have to follow the issues, we get to define them. And so on lobbying days at the Capitol, maybe we can't be really well dictated by what the legislators are doing for ordering, scheduling votes and everything. But at some point, if we have enough people who are willing to commit to taking that action, we can force the action that we're looking for. Maybe they're not willing to take up an issue that we want. Like, for example, Representative Westerman, Bruce Westerman, his bill, which would have capped state spending at a certain equation, would have been a fantastic cap to state growth.
That's right.
Hugely growth, right? Problem is that organizing didn't get enough there. Had some of those representatives who voted against it, had their constituents showed up and said, I'm watching, and looked them in the eyes and told them that, I think we had a different outcome. And to the strength of the Family Council, Jerry Cox is very good at this. He is very good at turning people to the Capitol, and you see that reflected in the legislative victories for the Family Council this last election cycle. We want to replicate that, and we think we can do that, but it takes work, and it takes organizing, and that's what we're working on doing. And so again, I just implore you to be plugged in with us. Melissa can bug you every day if you guys want, even if you just want a welcome good morning phone call, she can be your alarm clock, whatever you need, and that's why she's here. And the big thing is, she lives here in Hot Springs, she's committed to Hot Springs, and the whole point is we want you guys to know, like, we're willing to take action here, and we're willing to facilitate your desire to fix this country and this state, even your city and county. And like I said, we fought taxes together here in this town. So don't think that there's something too big or too small for us to take on. If there's something we can't take on, I'll just tell you, it's not within our, we don't have the time right now, we don't have the ability to get that done, but I can at least get Melissa to organize and help you. So, yeah, in the back here.
How come y'all are let water go down and go after the water when all you really have to do on top of it is, like pass fair tax, which would eliminate the IRS, which is watchdog of Obamacare.
Yeah, I agree. So his question, there seems a lot of times where we're doing fights that seem like we're dealing with symptoms rather than the root cause of the problem. And I agree. I would love to see comprehensive tax reform focused on eliminating the entire tax code and moving to a fair tax or something. Personally, I think it would be great. I think balanced budget amendment, again, these are personally things that I really like. The question is do we have the legislative votes in Congress to get those done? And we can't even keep discretionary spending at levels we agreed to just 2 short years ago. So do we think we could remake the tax code? I think that the tax accountants and the lawyers and the trial lawyer, I think we'd be biting off a big fight. But I think, to tell you the truth, I would love to attack the root cause of the problem. But unfortunately, it's about the votes in Congress, and I just don't think they're there yet. We had some other hands. We'll go here.
Jesse, is your name?
Jason.
Jason, I'm going to ask you a few questions and make a few statements that are going to be a little bit out of the norm for this group. I am a retired physician. I work at the Charitable Christian Medical Clinic. I have direct access to the people that the private option Medicaid expansion is going to benefit. I can tell you over the last 3 or 4 months, not one of my patients on their own knew about the private option Medicaid expansion. But let me get to the point. Some of them don't read. Some of them don't have the money to buy a newspaper. So when you say, oh, they're not doing anything, at the same time, I heard, aren't we thrilled that we canceled the $4.5 million to do the advertising so that they might have known what to do if they're capable? That's number one.
Sure.
Number two, is the goal to sign up the 250,000 people that are eligible, or is the goal to try to not sign up as many as are eligible? What is our real goal that we're talking about?
Sure.
And lastly, when patients came in for the last 2 months with the letter from Medicaid that said, in essence, because you already meet the criteria because you're on SNAP, you have a Medicaid number, call us within the next 2 weeks and tell us which plan you want to be on, or we'll assign it to you. I can tell you, many of the patients walked in with a letter and said, what does this mean? They had no idea what to do with it. Okay? So I don't, it sounds like you're kind of saying like, well, they just didn't do anything. These folks are, in many cases, incapable of doing what you're asking them to do.
So the number, I'll start with the last one first, and I'll move my way backwards. The number to focus on in this point is 600. That's how many people the taxpayers are currently funding, called navigators, to be out in the communities answering these questions. 600 people. Have you ever seen one, talked to one, know anything about them?
Well, I can tell you that the people at my clinic are facilitators, and that's what we do with every patient that checks out, is we try to walk them through the system when they're capable. But many of them don't have telephones. Almost none of them have computers.
Sure. Well, so here's my point. Is the point to enroll these people who need this help? From my point, had Obamacare, I would have not had Obamacare become law, so no, I would have not expanded Medicaid. To your point, in the current iteration, they burned through $4.5 million worth of advertising dollars, and you even said it, they don't even know what this is. What was the first $4.5 million going to do that the second $4.5 wasn't? So from our standpoint, it was stop throwing good money after bad. And to your third point, do we want to sign up the 250,000 or do we not? Arthur Brooks is the president of American Enterprise Institute, and he talks about the concept of learned helplessness. We're ultimately going to be committing a new population of people, and I think that there are, as you say, there are tons of cases of people who are completely incapable of taking care of these things, but this is from generations of learned helplessness. And I think that the best way is clinics like yours, Christian medical clinics. A friend of mine's a doctor, he's been doing Project Access for years. And I would love it if people had more money out of their own pockets to donate to create more clinics that take care of this stuff. Because at the end of the day, the thing that really breaks my heart the most is the poor quality of care that Medicaid delivers. Oregon studies show that Medicaid produces no significant health outcome differences for patients, which they've tracked, and that's not a private think tank study, that's a government doing that. And then you have University of Virginia, who finds that surgical patients on Medicaid are 97% more likely to die than those on private insurance and 13% more likely to die than those without insurance. And so I take a look at a costly, broken, ineffective delivery of medicine to people who might actually need it, and instead of actually fixing and getting out to medical care for people who really need it, we just expanded to populations for tons of people who don't. And it's unfortunate. So from my perspective, is it the goal to shut this thing down? Yes. But the goal is to create a medical care system that isn't built around what I think is a failure, which is Obamacare. I think we would have liked to see a different direction take the medical community. You're a doctor, you may have a different view. I'm not sure, but I hope that answered your question.
I appreciate what you say, but I have to tell you that my own opinion is that I think the Oregon study is flawed. I mean, if you look at what we do at the charitable clinic with the same population, with half the resources, we have studies to show that they do improve. So I don't know what happened in Oregon.
Sure.
Okay?
But
and basically that if these folks were able to go to a doctor, the same doctor that you and I go to, and if they could become educated on how to take care of their own health, which is the goal of every doctor towards every patient, I think there would be a tremendous benefit. I don't think the answer is to say things like, oh, well, if we only could have portability across state lines, that only helps those of us have lower premiums who already have health insurance.
Sure.
It doesn't help the person who has nothing.
But to your point, I mean, competition is the greatest. I mean, I think about this very simple, right? This is an iPhone. 10 years ago, a phone barely made a phone call and was the most expensive thing that you could do. It's now the most affordable thing. Everybody in this room probably has a cell phone, probably has an iPhone even. That was done through competition in a marketplace. We don't have a health insurance marketplace, as we should. Does it competing across state lines lower premiums? Absolutely, but it's going to lower premiums, which makes it more affordable for people who might have not previously been able to afford it. Not only that, the government involvement in the health insurance industry, which I bet you would agree, distorts the marketplace and drives up prices. To your point about the Medicaid study in Oregon, I would love to see more clinics like yours who provide charity care out there. The problem is that the government medicine is not about providing care, it's about providing coverage, which is politically popular. The Medicaid study in Oregon...
Let me just say one more thing. I am absolutely against Obama.
Sure.
I'm strictly talking about the private option Medicaid expansion.
Sure, and to your point, the private option Medicaid expansion is expanding within the vision of what Obamacare called for. When you look at what Obamacare is, I'll say pre-Supreme Court, it bullied states to push Medicaid to 138% and then creates a subsidy population, 138 to 400 for a federal poverty line. So to do a really fast lesson on the private option, Arkansas's current Medicaid population is 0 to 17% of the federal poverty line, which is about $2,000 a year. The new expansion, the 138 population, about $15,000 a year, and that 400% of the federal poverty line means that you can probably get about $44,000, at which point you're no longer subsidy eligible. So what did Obamacare do? Expanded Medicaid for 0 to 138, which is your $0 to $15,000 a year, and then provided subsidies. And if you think about a square and you draw a diagonal line, as your income grows, your subsidy shrinks. So that's the 138 to 400 population. That's what Obamacare is. The problem is that in addition to what Obamacare did, community rating, minimum essential benefits packages, it drove up the cost of health care for everybody. And their ideal was, is since we're providing subsidies, it offsets the increase in premiums. So the question, are we planning on signing people up? And so I'll take a national perspective and then I'll boil it right back down to Arkansas. The actuaries and the prices built into Obamacare prices were built on the concept that 7 million people nationwide were going to sign up for health insurance on the exchanges. They have to date signed up about 300,000, which means they are on pace to only do about 1.2, 1.4 million. What does that do to the actuaries on what they built these plans around? If you opened a restaurant and you expected 100 customers a day and you got 20, your prices have to go up 5 times. In addition to that, it's not just the 7 million that's important. The more important is 2.7 million. That's the number of millennials that must sign up for Obamacare, who pay into the system, who don't use it, who have to make that thing actuarially sound. That's not going to happen either because as of right now, young people just are flat out not doing it. And Now we come to Arkansas. So what's the outreach looking like to Arkansas to get young people and adults signed up? So far, we've seen groups like the Living Affected Corporation try to give free condoms away to students to get free Obamacare. Turned out 0 signups, not
Good.
1 sign up. You've got literally multi-millions of dollars of grants to the university system, to hospital systems, to clinics, to outreach organizations like Living Affected to do like what his clinic does, which is facilitate health. You've got 600 navigators in state, and at the end of the day, to the private options point, this was asked in committee last week by Senator Chesterfield. She said, okay, so we give these people the free insurance that we auto-assign. And she was critical of the auto-assignment process, not for the reasons I was, but for different reasons. How many people here know the ins and outs of their provider network, what's covered, what their deductibles are, all those things? How many people know those things offhand right now? Nobody, right? We just auto-assign 50,000 people private health insurance plans that they know nothing about. And what's the plan? DHS was asked, what's the plan to educate these people? Do you know what the plan was? They don't have one. And that's the problem, is that we tried to do this unique approach to expansion, and I think that absent spending millions of dollars, you're not going to get it right. And not only that, the biggest problem with what the private option did, in my opinion, was it created, they had an actuarial firm called Optimus Research do an analysis of the plan, and they said, we need you to score traditional Medicaid, do nothing in private option, and tell us which one's going to cost the most. The benefit of private insurance is that it pays higher provider rates. What does that mean? It means if I show up to the doctor with a private insurance plan, the doctor makes more money than somebody who walks in with traditional fee-for-service Medicaid. So our argument, and the CBO agrees, the Congressional Budget Office says private insurance costs 50% more than Medicaid. In the Optimus plan, they assumed that private option insurance plans and Medicaid plans cost the same. I think it's completely disingenuous to say that, and they would not correct that. So there are a number of assumptions built into the program. To his original point, there are people out there that need help, absolutely. Charity is very important. The government has stepped into a 0 to 17% of the federal poverty line. And I'll tell you that when you look at the numbers, you get where I think the people who truly need it is. So to put the numbers in perspective, we talked 0 to 17, 18 to 138, and then 138 to 400. So in the 18% of federal poverty line to 400% of poverty line, there are fewer people in that entire group than are in the 0 to 17. What does that mean? That means your entire middle class is smaller than the low class by 250,000 people. So you take a look at where is the need to help. The 0 to 17% of federal poverty line is 750,000 people. When you get to 18 to 138 to ultimately to 400, that's only 500,000. Which means that the middle class is continuing to shrink as the low class continues to grow. And I think, again, it's like what I talked about with this concept of learned helplessness. And it's not most of the time by anybody's fault of their own. They grow up in a house that is in a poverty trap, the circle of welfare, and it's tough to get out of those things, and it's learned helplessness. And to the point, what the private option architects wanted to do, and I think it's a very noble idea, institute personal responsibility and give them private insurance, which institutes a concept of like taking control of my medical coverage. He's a doctor, like he said. You want people aware and making action based on their health risk factors that doctors identify. That is healthcare in a nutshell, if I'm correct. Doctors identify problems, they prescribe solutions, they hope that their patients follow that. The concept behind the private option was we give them real insurance that gets them to doctors, because 1 in 4 doctors don't take new Medicaid patients. It's very unfortunate. Give them private insurance, and they can actually go out there and take control of their healthcare costs. Problem is like you said, some of these people can't read, they can't have help, and there's no, we're hiring these 600 of these navigators. I was in Northwest Arkansas Tuesday, and a guy came up to me, he said, my son works at this Obamacare, kind of like, what is it, the call centers, there's 800 people working at this call center. And the concept was that they're a national hotline to help problems with the website, take calls over the phone. He said, my son's one of 800 employees. It costs $80,000 to $100,000 a day just in man hours to run that facility. He said his son has taken 2 phone calls since October 1.
Oh,
They're
my
bored
gosh.
out of their mind.
That's about probably 1.8 million a month just salary.
just in salaries, not including.
Yeah.
I'm sorry? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and of course, it's on government lockdown, so he said the worst thing his son says is that you can't even play on your phone in there. But anyway, so to the point, I think to sum it up in a very simple way, as you agree, Obamacare, I think, exacerbates the worst parts of our healthcare system rather than fixing the root cause, which I think is moral hazard, people not taking responsibility, and I think it worsens that. But I'd love to talk to you more about it because I think we could go all day on it. We'll go with the yeah.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Can you imagine what Dr. Jack could do with the money we're just paying
Yeah.
I know.
the navigators?
I've got friends who are doctors too, and it's real, and there's doctors getting out of practice, doctors quitting because they see the writing on the wall.
My friend, Dr. Ham.
Yeah, it's sad because, people, doctors make a good life, but ultimately they're people who care about their patients, I'll tell a quick story, and I think it's indicative of doctors. I used to be a drug rep when I first got out of college, and I go talk to doctors all the time, and this doctor said, you know how I don't meet with drug reps most of the time? Imagine somebody standing at the edge of the Grand Canyon, it's 3 a.m, the sun's coming up, it's beautiful, and they're standing there's nobody around, and they accidentally trip and they fall over the Grand Canyon, they start falling, and halfway down they grab this little branch, and they're just holding on to this branch, and they're thinking, oh my gosh, right? But it's inevitable, this person's gonna die. How long can you hold? He said, from a drug rep's perspective, you want to put 50 branches down the side of that cliff, and I just want to put a fence up. And so doctors get this. They want to treat patients. They want to help patients. They want to get it. But the problem is that the healthcare system isn't built to do it that way. And unfortunately, the way that we changed it made it even worse. But you had a question in the back.
I think it's planned that this is not going to work.
Yeah.
It could, there's a Kathleen Sebelius. I don't know if you guys saw her. Probably one of the best interviews that I've actually seen, and it's unfortunate that this is what the media has come to, was on Comedy Central. Jon Stewart. Did you guys happen to see Jon Stewart's interview with her? He sat down and he actually grilled her. He's center left. He thinks he's one of those good government people. And he pulled out 2 laptops. He says, I've got an idea. And this was in early October. You're going to start signing up for Obamacare and trying to get a plan. And I'm going to download every movie in the history of the world and see who finishes first. He continued to push. And do you know what her complaint was? Well, we wanted single payer and we didn't get it. It was very, very, and ultimately, Obamacare is built, and we did a town hall in the village with Sylvester Smith. He's the head of NFIB. Some of you guys might have heard. He and I have talked about this, and we agree. Obamacare is meant to get us to the path to single payer. How does it do that? It continually expands Medicaid until it's universal Medicaid coverage. That means rolling Medicare into Medicaid, private insurance into Medicaid, and you're already seeing it with the cancellations that are happening, millions of cancellations. The administration knew this all along, because the important part was get people off of their own plans and get them onto the government exchanges, which will then get turned into Medicaid ultimately. So that's the plan, and I don't disagree with you.
My concern is about all these, however many, 4 or 5 or 25,000 or 1 million people that they've signed up at January 1st, that when they go in their doctor, it's not going to be there.
Yeah, it's a concern. And again, I was looking at legislators show me emails sometimes of constituents who, heartbreaking stuff. I've tried, I've called, I've done this, and I can't get signed up. People who actually just want to buy insurance. The question, will it be a functioning marketplace with insurance January 1?
No.
It's anybody's guess.
Dr. Jack, may we come to your clinic?
Yeah.
Well, we'll have to shut down.
No,
Understand something, I'm the first one to tell you that if the private option Medicaid expansion works,
Yeah.
we won't have a clinic come April,
Yeah. And
because
here's-
we'll have no
yeah.
patients.
Yeah.
But you're still gonna have,
I'm sorry?
you're still gonna have a percentage that are gonna.
Well, to be
fall
honest with you, we
through.
looked at the number, because I'm on the committee for that, and of the 900 active patients, 700 would be on the private option Medicaid expansion. Of the 200 that are left, 100 would be Obamacare, and 100 are illegal aliens.
Yeah. And here's the biggest thing that I think, I grew up in a state with higher Medicaid reimbursements than Medicare, which is actually pretty rare for most states. And what happens is, take Medicaid, which is ultimately the vision of Medicaid to provide health coverage for those who are mentally disabled, needy, the people who really need that stuff and can't take care of themselves. Medicare, however, was a senior citizen program in which everybody sort of chipped in. Now, we can talk about the benefits, how much benefits are put for how much it costs to put in, but ultimately, what's going to happen, and you're already seeing it, is that in order to pay for Obamacare, they made $700 billion in cuts to Medicare reimbursements. And as you continually expand Medicaid coverage, you're going to crowd out Medicare funding, you're going to crowd out Medicare's availability. And so this is a very serious issue for senior citizens. And I would tell you, if you've got friends of yours who are senior citizens who don't think that Obamacare affects them and their Medicare, you should tell them that they should think twice, because as the hospitals fill up with people who are Medicaid eligible, you know, without some huge surge in new doctors, in which from what I understand and what I'm seeing, that we're losing doctors. We're shrinking. We're going the other direction.
Yeah, we are.
And so what's going to happen is either we're going to have to start authorizing nurses, nurse practitioners, and physician's assistants to cover people, or something's going to have to give.
Jason, does it not bother you that the monopoly of Blue Cross Blue Shield is what's here?
Yeah, I mean, it does to an extent. And we were told within the private option that we would have a new base of competition because there's guaranteed taxpayer funding customers. Of course, we have 4 providers and 2 of them are Blue Cross, you know, I mean, and if you take a look at the most unfortunate part is that in the poorest and most minority-ridden communities in Arkansas, they only have Blue Cross Blue Shield.
That's right.
It does bother me, and to Missy Irvin's credit, she actually put in certain provisions within the law that limit how many providers are supposed to provide. That's why Blue Cross had to offer 2 different, you know, Blue Cross Blue Shield, multi-state Blue Cross Blue Shield Arkansas.
But it's all the same.
Well, it's, you know, I'm AFP Arkansas and there's AFP, we're the same, but we're different. Yeah, they're the same.
They are the same.
I agree with you, but they technically are legal entities, so no one provider can provide more than, I think you have to have at least 33% of one other provider in a state, so.
But you have a monopoly of
Yeah.
one insurance setting the fees for the doctor
And here's
and telling the patient what they're going to pay.
Yeah.
And that should not be.
And here's the problem too with all
Say
of
that
that.
again, dear?
You have one insurance setting the fees for the doctors and for what the patient is going to pay. And so Blue Cross Blue Shield has control of all Arkansas and what the fee schedule is going to be. And there are 2 other names, but they're Blue Cross Blue Shield, actually. And so what we have allowed in Arkansas, this is just one insurance company
Well,
that is directing.
yeah. It's, well, they have about an 85% market share, so there are some other providers, they're smaller providers, but they're small. Qual Choice, Ambetter, a couple others. They're,
Well, choice is Blue Cross Blue
right.
Shield.
And as
Let me speak to that a little bit. You know, on the metallic plans, your bronze has an enormous deductible.
$6,000.
5,000 or 6,000. Your silver has 3,500. Your gold has 1,000. Your platinum has less. And then in each plan, the bronze, it's afterwards your copay is 60/40, 70/30,
Yeah.
80/20. Now, if Blue Cross Blue Shield pays a hospital less money, then you're responsible for 20% of the less money.
Well, my thing is this. My thing is that this one insurance company is setting the fee schedule for Arkansas. And there's no competition.
Or the fee schedule for how much it pays doctors and hospitals?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes,
and
the
I don't
patient-
disagree with that.
And the patient, and you as an insurer have to agree with that, what they have set a fee that your copay is going to be, because they have set the fee for the doctor, then you have a 20% copay. And
if they pay a doctor less, then your 20% is less.
and then someone who does not have insurance that's cash falls under Blue Cross Blue Shield's fee schedule, because when they go in the doctor's office, that cash patient has got the same amount of money. They didn't contract with that insurance company. You see what I'm saying, Dr.
Yeah.
Jack?
Well, the lack of competition, and here's, you know
There's
what?
no
yeah,
competition.
and this is what happens, and this is prevalent in just about every industry. You see it in the financial industry. There are like 8 institutions that hold 90% of America's wealth, because when you continually regulate and regulate and regulate, you're ensuring that smaller competitors who could come up and challenge these bigger, they don't have the legal departments or the compliance departments or HR in order to deal with the massive amounts of regulation. And so Blue Cross Blue Shield grows bigger and bigger because their compliance and legal departments can keep up with it, and littler competitors could never do it. Imagine Imagine if you had a stack of regulations like what health insurance industries deal with, and you tried to open a bakery under those things. You'd have one giant bakery in town because in order to spread the cost of those regulations, you have to sell a whole bunch of stuff. And so it's an unfortunate part that Obamacare is going to do it. And Paul Ryan said this 2 years ago. He said, what's going to happen is you're going to have 5 major insurance companies nationwide that are basically shades of the same color, and it's what you see in the major banking industry, in all the majorly regulated industries, and that's where we're going. And so, to your point, it's only going to get worse.
If you could go over the line, though, you would see those premiums drop like a rock.
I think you would too,
You
because
would.
you're going to see some competitors, and I think, and one of the things that they're looking at in year 2 and 3, and we don't know if there's legal capability, but is multi-state insurance risk pooling. And so why is it that Arkansas can't take part in a regional insurance exchange
Right.
rather than just an Arkansas insurance
Right.
exchange, right?
And I think that's an area that we need to work on.
And it's something that we're talking about. And to tell you the truth,
It's a serious
from a
area.
very market-based perspective, insurance exchanges are actually a market-based reform in order to change the healthcare system. But you can't do it with the Obamacare exchanges. Why? Because the minimum essential benefits packages, the costs, all those things that they've loaded up into those things made it so it's, Dan Greenberg actually wrote an op-ed for the Arkansas Business, and he said, imagine you have 3 bakeries and the local government says you must sell this many cupcakes at this cost with this much frosting and this packaging. There's no competition there. I mean, you have sort of competition because they're different names, but they're selling the same product at the same price. So there's no real competition, and that's the unfortunate part.
Okay. I mean, if there's a problem, let's have a solution kind of person.
Sure.
I and friends of mine get tired of hearing, repeal Obamacare, repeal it. If we're going to repeal it, what are we going to replace it with?
Yeah.
And I know there's 2 Republican bills out there that have both been introduced by positions that are in Congress. Is there a simplified one-pager that AFP has that
I can get you one.
compares those
Sure.
2 bills as to, what's the best, what's the advantage for the free market?
Sure.
Because I've looked at one of them and I see a lot of good in it,
Yeah.
and you don't hear anything.
Yeah, so from a basic point, I think that we all in this room agree, which is very simple, is that Obama approached the solution from a philosophically wrong place to go about it, right? So the free market solution, and I'll tell you, I read this in college. It was written in, I think, 1998, and it's worth Googling if you guys want to write this down. It really does, I think, and it's probably 8 pages all in all. It really does dissect the main problems with healthcare, how you can solve them, and where these root drivers of the problems come from. It's written by Milton Friedman. It's called How to Cure Healthcare. Fantastic. It's like 8 pages long. It's a very accessible read, but he talks about health inflation. He talks about moral hazard, talks about the insurance industry, all of these things. How to Cure Healthcare is written by Milton Friedman. Very worth a read. From what you'll read from that, and I can get you as far as like which bills are where, the philosophical approach that he takes in healthcare reform, and that is where that we would come from rather than where Obamacare went. Get in the back.
Yeah, I just want to throw my 2 cents in now, because I think the bottom line is we must repeal it, because, we're destroying the best health care in the world for 10% of the population. We don't have a health care crisis, and I can give you some personal examples that I've been through. This was put in place to drive us to a communistic type state. That's the bottom line about all this other stuff.
Single payer, yeah.
Yeah, well, same thing.
Well,
We repealed Blanche Lincoln, time to repeal Mark Pryor, time to repeal some of these state Republicans that voted for it, that sold out to just bribes, is what it was.
sure. But Sherry, right?
Sharon.
Yeah, she's completely right in essence. Polling, and I'm not a person who loves like, we polled and focus grouped and it really works well. But you look at data on polling nationwide and you find that the repeal, replace message has become very stale. And your friends are very indicative of what most people hear. We hear repeal, but they actually want to hear, one, how does Obamacare impact them? Why, and what are solutions, rather than just saying repeal and replace, right? So we agree. We had Dana Perino in Arkansas. We had an event focused on what Obamacare means to you. And actually, if you guys want to write this down, calculatemycare.com. We built this website because we had plenty of people calling us saying, I want to know how much insurance would cost me under Obamacare, but I don't have time to fiddle with this broken website, and I don't want to dump all my personal information in there. So we built a very simple online calculator. You put in your county, your age, you say you want to buy bronze, silver, gold, or catastrophic, and you smoke or not. That's the most intrusive question we ask. You can put in your kids' names, their ages, you can put your spouse's names and ages in there, and it'll tell you how much you can expect your insurance to cost in Obamacare. Very simple. We're all about talking about why Obamacare is damaging and there's better solutions. The problem is that in a lot of ways, the media is more interested in the fights and sensationalism. We'll go to Manny and then I'll come back to you.
The next talking point that's going to come up next month is going to be the debt ceiling. Okay, we're all in this room and the whole country's talking about Obamacare.
Yeah.
We all agree, regardless of how, it's got to go somewhere. All right. The issue is that people on the other side, mainstream media and stuff, they're looking for something to take that off the subject.
Yeah.
So the question is, how does Americans for Prosperity going to handle the debt ceiling to keep the eye on this crisis on Obamacare so it still remains a priority?
Sure, and it's a great question. We had questions in our town halls on Tuesday about why is Americans for Prosperity not pushing for entitlement reforms within this budget deal we just passed? Well, the budget deal we just worked on was discretionary spending, which is why it's only $967 billion. Our real budgets are up in $3.5 trillion range, because then you have those mandatory drivers: Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, and debt. So interest payments on the debt. Those 3-4 things that I just listed are responsible for 60% of spending. And not only that, of that 60%, every 43 cents is borrowed of every dollar we spend. So tackling our debt crisis is real. How do we discuss the debt crisis while keeping Obamacare in the front of the conversation? We talk about entitlement reform. We present a very real and credible, I think, study that shows if we repeal Obamacare, this is the savings that we would result in. But 2, we talk about entitlement reform from a perspective of take a look at what we're having to do with current entitlement programs, and don't think that these fights aren't going to be happening 10, 20, 30 years from now if this is left in place. And so we will be continuing to put pressure on Obamacare. You've probably seen we've spent literally millions of dollars nationwide on advertising, keeping the conversation on Obamacare. I think that's why you saw a poll yesterday showing Cotton 7 points ahead of Pryor. We have pushed on the Obamacare issue. I was at a breakfast Pryor spoke at last week, and we had a volunteer of ours show up and ask, do you still think Obamacare is a success story? He did not back off of that statement. There is nonstop pressure on these things. In the debt fight, we will continually to talk about how much savings will be a result of Obamacare, and where we can find meaningful changes to entitlement programs that don't affect current recipients or those just about to receive, that we can produce long-term savings. And so it's a tough road to navigate, and we've obviously got a media that's complicit with big government. But again, I go back to something so simple as my staff creating a one-pager that you can tweet, Facebook, call, share. Those things help drive conversation. Like I said, without the social media pressure we applied on these congressmen in Arkansas, without that, we would have never got those earned media stories. We're now part of the national conversation on this budget deal, right? So if we assert our position that we think Obamacare should be repealed or defunded or gotten rid of in any way possible, and start talking about how we can address real long-term debt drivers, I think we win that fight. But it takes a very concerted effort of people sharing that message across every platform that they possibly can. It's a great question. I'm going to go in the back, and then I'll come back to you, Judy.
I think one of the big lies that is being told right now is the fact that there is no Republican alternative to Obamacare.
Sure.
There is. There have been put out, but the media won't talk about it, and the Senate won't do anything about it.
Yeah.
They just say, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that when the president says that there's no alternative to his program, Obamacare, he wants an all-inclusive program instead of a piecemeal program that looks at the real problems and tries to solve them.
Sure. So his question, or his comment, and I'll echo his comments. there is a lie within the media that conservatives don't have an alternative to Obamacare, and I think it's wrong. I am good friends with a good friend of Bill Clinton, and he told me in the 90s when he approached healthcare reform, the biggest lesson he would have learned, and he would have approached it had he could be able to do it again, was to approach it piece by piece. Because that's the problem with Obamacare. And honestly, we're in the midst of planning out and implementing a new database. I kind of mentioned this software earlier. We have people who have been in the business industry, very successful, and these programs don't just get, it's not like one day Americans for Prosperity says we're switching to this new system, October 1 we're going to drop it on you. We've been beta testing it. We've been having small tests in other chapters and other places. We've got tons of tests, and we're not going to drop it all at once. I mean, and this is the result of a guy who's never managed, a dog store, right? I mean, he's never had a job in his life, right? So there's no question that we've got a guy who can't manage a program change. To your point on the conservative alternative, we agree. There are plenty of alternatives out there. The RSC, the Republican Study Committee, has one by Representative Price. There are plenty of alternatives out there, but like you said, the media is not interested in hearing it. The president's not interested in proposing it, but it sounds good to people that we're just against things. But I'm happy to be against Obamacare, to tell you the truth. Judy?
I'd like to change subject.
Sure.
I want to know what your stand is on the Constitutional Convention that they're talking about.
Yeah, I was asked this on Tuesday. Honestly, we don't have a stance right now. I think it's, I got an email from Secure Arkansas saying that we are the ones pushing it. I can tell you that that's not true. I think the comment was, Mark Levin wrote the Liberty Amendments, and I think that maybe a couple years, I don't even remember how long ago it was, I asked around, maybe a couple years ago, Mark Levin spoke at an event from one of our AFP chapters. Dana Perino was here, like I said. We've had Herman Cain. You guys have seen all these. You guys have seen plenty of speakers come through here. Mark Levin is in no way associated with AFP at all, but the email comes through saying that AFP backed and supported Mark Levin pushing for a con-con, right? It's a lie. We're not involved in that. I don't know what our stance is, to tell you the truth, on an official standpoint. I can get that answer.
Is there some way you could educate us of the pros or cons of this?
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you just from my personal understanding, not speaking from an AFP personnel standpoint. The concept is that there are a number of constitutional amendments that we think would be beneficial, or that people think would be beneficial to fix the country. My simple rebuttal is we've got a great constitution, we're not following it. So how could amending it make it any different?
You just need to follow it.
Exactly, right? So the second point is, can we get amendments through? There needs 38 states to ratify constitutional amendments to the Constitution. At best, a whip count of states, you have 28 states run by Republican governors right now, assuming those are Republican states, which you got Ohio, Florida, swing states like Virginia. So to think that we've got 38 in the bag who are willing to sign on to something like a balanced budget amendment, I don't think is real. But the concern with a lot of people is what's called a runaway convention, in which you start a constitutional convention and more people organize who want to do things like repealing certain parts of the Constitution, or adding things like healthcare is a right, guns are bad, right? Things like that. So from that standpoint, that's the concern of a lot of people. Again, we're not in any way involved in that from an official standpoint. I know, like I said, we've been accused of it. It's flat out untrue. I've never talked to Mark Levin in my life, but I listened to him on radio in the back.
You don't want to open up that Pandora's box, because once you do, you can't shut it.
Sure.
And any dictator can change anything once it's open.
Sure.
And we've got one now.
Yeah, and to my original point, we've got a constitution we're not following. Why would changing it make it any better,
You can always add amendments, you can always do something else.
Yeah.
Don't open up that box.
Yeah, I agree. I agree from a personal standpoint. Well, I think we've gone for a while. Again, I guess my final plea is, did everybody get their information to Melissa? And maybe if you have, on your way out when you grab a t-shirt, if you can just tell her something that you don't even have to be super interested in doing it. Maybe tell her something that you're interested in doing. Maybe you're willing to make one phone call in the next month. Maybe you're willing to send a tweet when it's time. Maybe you're willing to send an email through our Action Center. Just hook up with Bill or Melissa and just let them know, because I'll tell you that we can talk till we're blue in the face, and I'm happy to come talk to everybody who wants to hear me. But at the end of the day, if we're not sharing words with our community and we're not taking action, it's the same thing the good book says, faith without action is dead, and I agree completely.
Can you get us a one-sheet talking point on the Republican
Absolutely.
alternatives
Yeah.
to Obama?
Yeah, I'll tell you, I told you about how to cure healthcare. I can make, these things are great, right? Did everybody get one of these?
Yes.
We try and do these every time, because what we're gonna try and do is take the most important parts of it that you need to know, and we can do one-pagers for anything. So maybe there's a bill even in the fiscal session that you don't know about, and it's sometimes tough to get an answer. Call us and we'll create a one-pager for you. We're very happy to do these. Make sure you email me. I think you have my email. I'll give you my cards. Anybody who wants it, there's a stack will be right here. Let me take that out.
Jason, I'd also like to applaud Sharon. She did a lot of phone calls.
Yeah, I appreciate that very much. Again, my name is Jason. I'm the State Director of Americans Prosperity. I've met many of you. If you haven't met me yet, come introduce yourself. I'm sometimes good with names, sometimes bad with it. I do these things sometimes 3-4 nights a week, so I can be inundated. But I'll tell you, Faulkner County tonight, I just got the report, had about 130 people at their town hall, which is fantastic. And I hope that they turn those into workers. And so the biggest thing, I'll tell you, Bill's got his program of go out and get 3 people. 3 should be your minimum. And some people may have heard me before. I'm a big believer in the grassroots policy of going out and getting 11 people. But I will tell you from personal experience, 11 is kind of a cap. Nobody should do 12. And most people don't know why, but one of the best managers in the history of the world tried it, 12, and one turned on him, Jesus. So keep it at 11, because that's how many people anybody can manage. Thank you again for coming out. I left my business card. I'll put them up at the front table.
Have you got a position or a statement on governor?
We don't take official positions on candidates. We do issue education and things like that. And honestly, I can tell you that we don't like Mike Ross's issues, but as far as official positions on candidates, we don't ever take them.